Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Guillermo Bustamante. Soy docente de inglés de la Escuela Superior de Ciudad, Sahagún. Y el día de hoy abordaremos un tema bastante interesante de segundo semestre de la materia de idioma 2, inglés A1.2. Por motivos del tema, pues se estará dando en inglés para que pueda entenderse mejor. Okay? So the unit is number 3. The unit name is the past and now. And the topic is regular verbs pronunciation. So let's check first. Let's talk about past. Remember that the past simple is the most common way of talking about past events or states which have finished. It is often used with some past time references like phrases like yesterday, 2 years ago, some minutes ago, the last week, etc. Okay, so I'm going to talk you about a short trip that I did with my family, a trip to Real del Monte. 2 years ago, I visited Real del Monte with my family. We ate some delicious pasties. My mom bought some souvenirs, and we walked along the downtown. I think that you all have once at least visited Real del Monte, right? So let's check. Let's check how it works. As you see, here we can check some interesting verbs. Remember that we have two kinds of verbs. We have regular and irregular verbs. The irregular verbs, we can see them here in these two middle sentences, like ate and bought. We name irregular verbs because of they are irregular. They change from the present to the past and the participle. However, the regular verbs don't change. They just, we have just to add two letters at the end to make them be past or to make them be in participle. So let's check and remember how the regular verb past grammar work. So in the infinitive or in the base form, we know the verb like, for example, watch, play, like, arrive, study, try, stop, and row. But in past, we have to add some letters at the end. For example, if the verb is like a normal verb, we just have to use the general rule adding ed. Like, for example, in watched and played. However, if the verb ends in e, in a letter e, we just have to add a d letter at the end. If our verb ends in y, and plus obviously the consonant plus y, we just have to change the y to I and just add the e and d. Another rule that we can see here is that if the verb ends in a consonant plus vowel, we have to double the last consonant, okay? Like stopped and robbed. Let's check how this works in a really basic exercise. So let's discover these things. Let's read. Last year, I visited a beautiful town. It was the first magic town in our country. I walked along downtown. In the afternoon, my family and I ate in a restaurant. We ate delicious enchiladas mineras. We visited the quarries. We stayed in a cabin in the woods. Vamos a ver qué tienen en común los verbos visited, walked, and stayed, and how the past verb ends. Ya sabemos que los verbos terminan en ed si son regulares. Y como pudimos ver en la parte anterior, hay una pequeña regla que tenemos que aplicar para esto. Vamos a repetir la pronunciación de estos tres verbos, ya que ninguno de ellos se pronuncia de la misma manera, aunque tengan una terminación similar, como visited, walked, and stayed. Primero vamos a intentar con este pequeño ejercicio. La mayoría vamos a ver que tenemos diferentes opciones, una en presente, una en pasado y una en gerundio. Para lo que nosotros necesitamos, vamos a utilizar nuestro verbo en pasado. Vamos a revisar. Tenemos la primera. Dice, last week, we have visits, visited, and visiting. Obviously, we can use visited. Last week, I visited a museum. Number 2, we have watches, watched, and watching. We're going to use watched. She watched a movie yesterday. The third exercise say, we stayed, stays, or staying in a cabin. As we can be checking, we're going to use stayed. And the last one, we have he walks, walked, and walking along the downtown. We're going to use the letter B option, walked. So we have last week, I visited a museum. She watched a movie yesterday. We stayed in a cabin. And at the end, he walked along the downtown. As you can see and hear, there are some differences, even if the verbs are in past simple. Let's check. To pronounce these verbs, we have two options, and we have two kinds of sounds. We have the voiceless sound and the voiced sounds. How can we differentiate those sounds? It's very easy. With your fingers, you're going to select 3 of your fingers, and you are going to put your throat. You're going to touch your throat. And if you talk, you can feel some vibrations on your throat. If your throat vibrates, it could be named voiced sounds, like this over here, like the kids screaming. However, if your throat doesn't vibrate, it is a voiceless sound. Let's check how it works. Here we have some rules and differences. We have 3 different rules. We have the I, D, T, and D. So as we have been checking, we have 2 different sounds, the voiceless and voiced sounds. So let's do the exercise like the last image. First, we're going to take 3 of your fingers, and we're going to touch or throw. We're going to repeat the following verbs. We have call, clean, offer, damage, love, use, amaze, rob, and claim. The thing is that we have to focus on the last sound. In this case, we have L, N, R, J, V, Z, Z, B, and M. These sounds, this last sound of each verse, make your throat vibrate, okay? However, in the voiceless part, we're going to check the same exercise. So let's touch or throw. We have help, look, sniff, laugh, wash, watch, kiss, dance, and fix. If you're following me, you can notice that both verbs, both columns change. In this case, in the voiced part, your throat vibrated. And in the voiceless part, it doesn't vibrate. Your throat doesn't vibrate, okay? So how can we differentiate them? With the vibrations, okay? And now, these 2 letters, the ED added to each verb, is going to sound in the voice part like a D at the end. So we're going to pronounce the same verb, but we're going to add a D at the end. For example, we have called, cleaned, offered, damaged, loved, used, amazed, robbed, and claimed. Okay? So this is the voiceless sound. It's not anymore called or cleaned or offered. It's called, cleaned, and offered with this D at the end. In the other side, we have the voiceless part. So if this one uses the D sound, this one is going to use the T sound. So we have the same verb like help, but at the end, we're going to use a T sound. For example, helped, looked, sniffed, loved, washed, watched, kissed, danced, and fixed. And the last sound we're going to check is not like a sound by itself, is letter at the end of the verb. For example, if you have want or need, both verbs ends in T or D. So if your verb ends in T or D, the last sound, this ed, is going to sound like a id. For example, wanted, needed, added, visited, okay? So these, we have three different sounds for regular verbs. In addition, you can use the, to check that the vowel sound at the end of a verb, use the D pronunciation because it vibrates. Like, for example, follow. If you touch your throat, follow, enjoy, play, try, continue. All of those verbs make your throat vibrate. So at the end, you're going to use the D sound. Followed, enjoyed, played, tried, and continued. So now that we know these differences, we're going to imagine that we're talking about our last trip. We're going to use the following sentences to describe the activities that we did in the trip. And we have some differences with different verbs. So we have, I visited a new city last summer because it ends in T. We stayed in a small hotel by the beach. I tried local food for the first time. My family and I watched good films. My family and I explored a famous museums. I loved the trip and brought some souvenirs for my friends. We swam in the lake every afternoon. I wanted to stay more time in the hotel. We watched the sunrise on our last day, and we returned home and rested the whole trip. Okay, so these are some very good tips to make better your, to improve your pronunciation, actually. So if you can't practice by yourself, practice makes you better. So here you are going to find some very good exercises that will help you to improve your pronunciation and listening in regular verbs. Okay? Thank you very much and see you soon.
Este video es presentado por el Sistema Ciencia Garza Educativa de la Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo.